Well, welcome to episode 56 of 10-Minute Record Reviews, and this time we're going to talk about Deep Purple's brilliant album from 1972, Machine Head. And what I have here is a somewhat less dramatic 1976 Canadian repress, which still sounds pretty darn good. So this, of course, is Deep Purple. It's heavy blues rock. You can call it heavy metal if you want. And you can get into those sort of arcane debates about whether any of the heavy rock from the early 1970s was heavy metal as such. I frankly think it's better than things which subsequently became known as heavy metal. Whatever this is, it's heavy, it's full of virtuoso playing, it's full of brilliant songwriting, it's full of attitude, it sounds amazing, it's full of power, it's a life-changing experience, frankly. And I guess that's maybe a segue for me to get something off my chest. If you read anything about Deep Purple online, if you read books about Deep Purple, if you listen to the Cognoscenti, what you hear is that Deep Purple's greatest moment comes with Deep Purple in Rock, which is the preceding album. And I'm here to tell you that's wrong. This is the greatest height which this band ever scaled, in my humble opinion. Ian Gillan is never better as a singer, before or since. Ritchie Blackmore and John Lord are never better either individually as players or in playing off each other with dueling solos and in just the way the songs are constructed, which are well balanced, which show off the individual talents of the players. In some respects, it's almost, this album is more like a jazz album in the way the songs are played and in the ways in which the musicians are featured than almost any other album I can think of within the rock and roll genre. In the end, you're left wondering whether it's the band themselves or the individual talents which you admire more. On top of all this album has a great origin story. It has a fantastic cover. It has wonderful production by Martin Birch, so it's a winner across the board. Anyway, let's talk about the music. So side one starts with Highway Star. If you don't like this song, I'm not sure you really like rock and roll. I think this is one of those examples of a very heavy song, which is very, very accessible. It's got classic rock and roll lyrics with sort of automotive / sexual innuendo. A path trodden by many other 70s bands, but maybe never as infamously or successfully as here. It has just epic soloing. It's an incredible road trip song. It all these things and more. And it leaves, I think, the listener pretty much breathless at the end. Then you're into Maybe I'm a Leo, which is, you know, the note I have here is dirty workout, and I think that's pretty much exactly what this is. It has a monster riff. I kind of miss the days when because it doesn't happen anymore. I don't hear this on the radio, and I know no one cares these days for this kind of thing. That's fine, but I really miss the days when a band would spend time figuring out just a really kick-ass monster riff, maybe 2 or 3 of them, and finding ways to use those as the backbone of the song, and would linger on the riff for extended periods of time because people were quite happy to wait for the singing to come in later because the riff was just so groovy. And this is an example of that. If you're going to write a killer riff, great. Even better, play it all the way through the song and recognize that is why kids are buying these records, because they got off to the sound of those riffs. And this album is absolutely chock full of them, and this particular song is a great example. So Pictures of Home. So this is another excellent song. Probably the best example of John Lord's organ not only being used to build tension as it does so spectacularly here, but actually even more in other tracks here, but as a rhythmic glue, as almost a percussive instrument at times. The organ all the way through rumbles along. The organ all the way through the song is the anchor to which the rest of the instrumentation and the song as a whole is connected. The lyrics are, I mean, Ian Gillan, wonderful singer, really fantastic singer, a very emotive singer, tons of attitude, everything you want in a rock and roll frontman. But, lyrically, he was a bit hit and miss, I think you could say at times. Like the whole business about, the call of the black-footed crow. Incidentally, there is no such thing as a black-footed crow. So there you have it. But I'm splitting hairs. It's a great song. And then we have Never Before. Now, if Maybe I'm a Leo was a dirty workout, this is what I would call a funky workout. This is, in my mind, if you can picture that t-shirt from the 70s with the title Keep on Truckin' and I think the drawing by R. Crumb of the guy sort of stretching his feet out like this with the Panama hat on. This song is for me the oral version of that particular image. John Lord is so awesome here from start to finish. In fact, his playing is so epic. It's almost like they just run out of ideas because he's been so good at the end. It just kind of falls off a cliff at the end of the song. The bridge to this song is super Beatlesy, which is a nice touch. And I haven't mentioned Ritchie Blackmore yet, but his solo here is really terrific. So all the way through this first side, when the needle finally hits the inner groove, you're basically just gasping for breath. So good has it been. Side 2 begins with Smoke on the Water, and it's funny that this is the most famous, maybe this is their most famous song, it probably is. It's certainly the most famous song in this record, and I think that's kind of funny because for me this is at best the 4th best song on the album. It has a great riff, although maybe a little kind of straightforward, you have to say. But I don't think the verses are necessarily up to much. I'm not even so sure the chorus is particularly snappy. Again, it's not bad, and the story that's being told is a funny story, is an interesting story, is a classic sort of timeless story, which is embedded in the minds of rock fans everywhere. So it's almost hard to kind of make any judgment about this song just because it's such an institution. And when Smoke in the Water is done, then we have Lazy, which certainly in terms of rock and roll, I don't know, I mean, I think you could make other claims for soul jazz or gospel, but I think in terms of rock and roll, Lazy contains the greatest moment for the Hammond organ in history, with Lord's long, slow build-up, which eventually builds into this crescendo, which, if you're sitting by yourself at night as a kid listening to this album and you've got it cranked up, is actually scary as anything. And it's thrilling. It's the kind of thing where you knew the rest of the band were in awe of the virtuosic skills of their organ player and the importance of John Lord to the emotional impact of Deep Purple and the musical impact of Deep Purple is so clear in this particular piece. The production of this is kind of interesting in that the organ is clearly right front and center. The bass and the drums too sound like they're being played right in front of you, but Ritchie's guitars sound like they're being played down the hallway in a bathroom. Which I mean, I think the overall effect is good, but it's an interesting kind of a choice. It's also an interesting and unusual rock and roll song, and the singing doesn't start until the song is well over halfway done, and there's always something to be said for keeping your powder dry. I mean, most rock and roll hits have one or two hooks, and that manages to get them on the charts. But when a band is in a real vein of form, they've often got several different riffs, several different hooks which they can spend on one song, and this is the case in almost every one of the tracks on this album, and it's certainly the case on Lazy. So a great example of keeping your powder dry. And then we conclude with my favorite song by Deep Purple, my favorite song on this album, which is Space Truckin', this is as 70s as it gets, right? Because you've got the concept of truckin', which is a poorly defined and yet ubiquitous expression in the early 1970s. I remember growing up as a kid, you just saw this word everywhere. You saw it on T-shirts, you saw it, you heard it in songs, yet exactly what it meant. I mean, I think I know now. Now I'm a grown-up, but it's never that explicitly defined. Further to what I was saying about having sort of multiple ideas to work into a song, here you have not just one, but two great riffs that other bands would just kill for, contributed by Ritchie. The drums, Ian Pace's drumming, and I haven't mentioned Ian Pace yet, but Ian Pace's drumming is fantastic. The drums totally make this song all the way through. You got a chorus which is comprised of "Come on, let's go, space truckin', yeah, 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 space truckin'." That's That's as visceral as it gets. That's as rock and roll as it gets. You got Ritchie doing palm muting, and this is a really early use of this particular technique. It's phenomenal how much the technique of playing the electric guitar changes from 1965 to 1972. Unrecognizable, the playing here, compared to just a few years ago. And Ritchie, of course, is one of the big innovators there. And the overall effect, the guitar, the drumming, the amazing riffs, the tightness of the band, the energy of this song, the kind of unrestrained, sort of loony, youthful rock and rollness of the lyrics is just something that is liberating, is exciting, is freeing, it's thrilling. And that's true of so much of this particular album. So in sum, I can't give this anything less than 5 out of 5 stars. It's Deep Purple's greatest achievement. It is one of the contenders for the top 10 albums of the 1970s, I think without question. It was birthed in peculiar circumstances, trying to record an album in a different country, having to deal with a fire and a relocation and all sorts of different things, and using these things as grist, and you can feel the energy, which I don't feel was as much there in rock, and I don't feel is necessarily there subsequently. You can feel the energy just being transmitted right into the groove of the record. 5 out of 5, brilliant album.